The pirates' greatest mistake. The celebration aboard the Black Maw was a raucous, chaotic affair. The stench of unwashed bodies, spilled drinks, and overheated circuitry filled the dimly lit command deck. Captain Drexar Vol, a hulking figure covered in chitinous plating and deep scars from a dozen battles, lounged in his command chair with an air of smug satisfaction. His mandibles clicked together as he raised a glass of stolen Terran whiskey, the amber liquid glowing under the flickering neon lights. "To the easiest payday of our lives," his guttural voice rasped, echoing through the chamber. The cheers of his crew, a ragtag assembly of interstellar cutthroats, mercenaries, and slavers, shook the bulkheads. They had reason to celebrate. 50 human children, taken straight from an isolated Terran colony. It had been a flawless raid. No casualties, no pursuit. The humans had been completely blindsided, as expected. Drexar swirled his drink, relishing the taste of his victory. Humans were soft, sentimental, predictable. Their love for their offspring made them weak. They would pay handsomely for the safe return of their little ones. And if they tried to resist, well, he had other buyers lined up, buyers who wouldn't hesitate to turn human whelps into commodities. Lieutenant Korak, his second in command, slithered forward on his muscular, coiled tail. Unlike Drexar, who was a brute of muscle and armored plating, Korak was more cunning, his species specializing in deception and manipulation. His black eyes gleamed with malice as he handed over a datapad. "The ransom demand is ready, Captain," Korak hissed. "Shall we transmit it to the human colony?" Drexar chuckled, his mandibles twitching in amusement. "Not yet. Let them stew in their misery. Humans panic when they don't know what's coming. It'll make them desperate. Desperate prey makes for easy kills." On the main display, the security feeds showed the holding cells where the children were kept. Small, vulnerable figures huddled together in the cold metallic chambers, some clutching each other for comfort, others crying softly. It was an amusing sight. Drexar had heard the stories of human ferocity, of their so-called legendary warriors. But looking at the terrified children, he scoffed. "Look at them," he sneered, taking another sip. "So weak, so helpless. The galaxy fears these creatures." He laughed, a deep guttural sound. "Their young can't even defend themselves." A junior officer, fresh from the fringes of space, hesitated before speaking. "But Captain, I've heard rumors of what happens when you take human children. The stories about the Earth Defense Force." Crack. Drexar's tail lashed out, striking the officer hard across the face, sending him sprawling to the deck. The room fell into uneasy silence. "Ghost stories," Drexar snarled. "Tales told by incompetent raiders who got themselves caught. Humans don't scare me. They can't even find us. We are hidden in the Maw Nebula. No sensors can penetrate it. Our shields are unbreakable, our position untraceable. By the time they even think about looking for us, we'll be drowning in their credits." The tension in the room eased, and a chorus of laughter rippled through the crew. The junior officer scrambled back to his feet, rubbing the fresh bruise on his face, but wisely staying silent. Drexar leaned back into his chair with a sigh of contentment. "Let them scream into the void for their lost children," he muttered. "They'll never see them again." But he was wrong. Very, very wrong. New Eden Colony. 3 minutes after the abduction. The emergency sirens screamed through the air, blaring across every sector of New Eden, a thriving Terran colony nestled on the edges of explored space. David Rennick, the colony's security chief, stormed into the command center, his fists clenched, his expression cold as steel. The air in the room was thick with tension, but no one panicked. The display screens showed the unthinkable. 57 children, gone in an instant. One moment they had been playing, studying, and laughing. The next, gone without a trace. No alarms had gone off. No ships had been detected. The pirates had struck like ghosts. The colony's governor, a hardened woman named Elise Vance, turned to David with grim determination. "They think we'll beg," she said through clenched teeth. "They think we'll pay whatever they ask." David's jaw tightened. He had been a soldier before settling here, before starting a family. He had seen war, had fought in battles where lesser men would have broken. And right now, as he looked at the empty space where his daughter should have been, something inside him changed. "They think we're weak," he murmured. His voice was low, but it carried through the room like a war drum. "They think we'll play their game." He turned to the comm officer. "Send the distress signal." The officer hesitated. "Priority level." David locked eyes with him. "Code Black." Gasps filled the room. Code Black was reserved for one thing only: an immediate full-scale military response. Within seconds, the signal shot across the galaxy, reaching Earth Defense Force Command in Geneva. The response came in less than 10 seconds. Acknowledged. 7th Fleet mobilizing. Stand by for counter-operation. Hostile force will be eradicated. ETA. 4 hours. 4 hours. That was all it would take for the might of humanity's war machine to descend upon these pirates like the wrath of a vengeful god. The colony's citizens had once been engineers, miners, and terraformers. They had come here for a peaceful life. But peace had been broken. And now, they would remind the galaxy why you never, ever take human children. Across the colony, parents weren't crying. They weren't pleading. They were preparing. A mother, once a combat medic, checked her weapons. A father, still in his mining gear, pulled out an old service rifle. Colonists rushed to prepare transports, patch into military comms, and load their personal arsenals. David Rennick stood in the center of it all, watching, waiting. His voice cut through the growing storm of controlled fury. "They took our children," he said, his voice cold and sharp as a blade. "They think they're safe, hidden in some nebula." He turned to the gathered crowd, eyes burning. "They are wrong. The 7th Fleet was coming, and so was humanity's wrath. The wrath of humanity." The Maw Nebula swirled like an ominous bloodstain in the void, its chaotic clouds of charged particles cloaking the pirate stronghold from prying eyes. Inside the fortress of the Black Maw, Captain Drexerville still basked in the smug glow of his triumph, unaware that his fate was already sealed. Deep within the cold, metal walls of the holding cells, a dozen small figures crouched in the dim light, their faces hardened not with fear, but with determination. Lisa Rennick, 12 years old, her brown eyes sharp with intelligence, sat cross-legged on the cold floor, her fingers working with mechanical precision on a device she had assembled from stolen scraps of tech. A repurposed power cell, a comm chip, and a piece of circuitry stripped from a careless guard's wrist computer. It wasn't much, but it was enough. Her voice, calm and controlled, whispered through the dim space. "Signal is active. Transmission encoded and sent." The boy next to her, Jamie Liu, barely older than 10, swallowed hard. "Do you think they got it?" Lisa didn't look up. They got it. Outside the cell, one of the pirate guards shifted restlessly. The air in the base was different now. The laughter of the crew had faded. The celebrations had dulled. Something felt wrong. Something was coming. The fleet moves. Above Earth, the 7th Fleet moved like a pack of wolves scenting blood. Carrier ships, the size of entire cities, loomed in orbit, their hulls bristling with missile silos and kinetic railguns. Flanking them were sleek, predatory destroyers, their armored bodies cutting through the void like ancient warships reborn. At the head of the formation, the EDF Damascus, flagship of the fleet, led the charge. On the Damascus Bridge, Commander Maya Rodriguez stood like a statue of wrath incarnate. Her dark eyes burned as she stared at the holographic projection of the Maw Nebula. "The Black Maw is our primary target," her voice carried across the command deck. "We don't just hit them, we break them. Permanently." She turned to Admiral Pierce, a grizzled veteran with cybernetic implants lining the side of his face. "Admiral, the moment we breach the nebula, the pirates will realize their mistake. We can expect them to fight like cornered rats." The older man smiled grimly. "They won't get the chance. They won't see us coming." Rodriguez nodded. "Good, because I want this to be a message to every slaver, every raider, and every pirate in the galaxy. No one touches human children and walks away." She stepped forward, her fingers gliding over the command console. "Deploy Ghost Squadron." The Phantom Assault. The nebula was vast, but the stealth fighters of Ghost Squadron were even more elusive. Their matte black hulls bent light and radiation, rendering them near invisible against the storm of ionized gases. Inside his cockpit, Captain Jack Morrison grinned. "All right, ghosts, time to haunt some nightmares." The squadron split into attack formation, their presence undetectable by traditional sensors. The first target appeared, a lone pirate corvette patrolling the edges of the nebula, oblivious to the doom rushing toward it. Morrison's voice was ice cold. "Ghost lead to squad. Take them out." Silent takedown. The blackened fighters struck like shadows. A pair of precision laser bursts severed the corvette's engines, leaving it dead in space. Another fighter followed up with an EMP blast, frying its communications. The entire ship was disabled before the pirates inside could even react. "First blood," Morrison muttered. One by one, the outlying pirate patrols vanished into the darkness, their signals going dead without so much as a distress call. On the Black Maw, Captain Drexarval frowned as his comms officer spoke nervously. "Captain, we've lost contact with 3 patrol ships." Drexar's mandibles clicked in irritation. Nebula interference. Probably just comm disruptions. But a sliver of doubt crept into his mind. Something felt wrong. The children's escape plan. Inside the holding cells, Lisa Rennick exhaled as a faint vibration ran through the floor beneath her. That was it. The signal. The fleet was here. She turned to the others, her voice steady. "It's time." Jamie nodded, gripping the stolen plasma cutter they had scavenged from the maintenance shaft. He crawled forward and jammed the device against the seam of the cell door. A faint hum filled the air as molten metal began dripping onto the floor. The pirate guard outside heard the noise, his scaled head jerking toward the cell. "Hey, what the hell are you doing?" Before he could finish his sentence, Penny Wu, the smallest of the children, darted up to the bars. "Help! He's sick," she wailed, pointing to one of the boys clutching his stomach. The guard hesitated. That hesitation was his mistake. The plasma cutter finished its job. The cell door groaned and suddenly burst open. Lisa moved like lightning, grabbing the stolen energy beacon from her boot. Before the guard could react, she drove it into his ribs. A current of electricity sent the alien crumpling to the floor. Jamie grinned. "Nice one." Lisa turned to the others. "We move now. Stick to the plan." The children scattered, moving through the base like shadows. Weeks of observation had given them everything they needed. Guard rotations, blind spots, access routes. One by one, they disappeared into the base's ventilation shafts, using stolen security cards to unlock the way forward. They weren't just escaping. They were taking the base apart from the inside. The beginning of the end. On the Black Maw's bridge, the comms officer's voice turned into a panicked shriek. "Captain, our security feeds are offline. We're detecting." He paused, eyes wide with terror. Human forces, inside the base. Drexarval felt something he hadn't felt in years. Fear. A new voice crackled through the ship's speakers. Calm. Controlled. Deadly. "This is Commander Maya Rodriguez of the Earth Defense Force. You have one chance to surrender." Drexar's mandibles twitched in rage. "You have no authority here. This is pirate space." Rodriguez's voice did not change. "Wrong. This is human space now." The nebula outside ignited as the full might of the 7th Fleet unleashed hell. The firestorm begins. The Maw Nebula was no longer a place of secrecy. It was no longer the perfect hiding spot for raiders, slavers, and criminals who preyed on the weak. It was a graveyard in the making. The Seventh Fleet had arrived, and it brought hell with it. The first wave of missile fire from the EDF Damascus streaked through the swirling nebula clouds, illuminating the darkness with explosions of plasma and fire. The nebula itself twisted and burned, ionized gases reacting violently to the energy discharges. On the bridge of the Black Maw, Captain Drexarval watched in growing horror as the entire horizon turned to fire. "What?" he stammered, his voice cracking as explosions bloomed like dying stars. "What are they doing?" Lieutenant Korek, his normally composed second-in-command, was gripping the edge of the control console, his tail coiling and uncoiling in distress. "They're burning the nebula, Captain. They're setting it alight." Drexer slammed a fist onto the console. "That's insane. Do they have any idea what they're tampering with?" A voice cut through the chaos. Cold, unyielding. "This is Commander Maya Rodriguez of the Earth Defense Force. This is not a negotiation. This is your final warning. Return the hostages and surrender, or you will be erased." The communication cut off, but the destruction continued. The human fleet was not attacking the pirate ships directly. Not yet. Instead, they were igniting carefully calculated portions of the nebula, herding the pirate fleet into a kill box. They weren't fighting. They were executing. Inside the base, chaos and rebellion. Deep within the heart of the Black Maw, the children moved like ghosts through the corridors, striking with precise, calculated brutality. Lisa Rennick gripped the stolen plasma baton tightly, leading the charge as they swept through the base's underbelly. They had memorized the routes. They had planned for the guards' reactions. And now, they were executing exactly as they had trained. A pirate guard spotted them and roared, raising his weapon. Before he could fire, Jamie Liu lunged forward, swinging a metal pipe into the alien's knee. The guard howled in pain, staggering. Lisa followed up with a quick, surgical strike to his temple. The guard crumpled. Another one down. "Keep moving," Lisa ordered. "We have to get to the security hub before they figure out we've taken the lower decks." The kids, their faces set with grim determination, followed her lead. These weren't just children. They were the next generation of human defenders. And they were winning. The pirates' desperate defense. Back on the bridge, Drexarval was realizing that everything was unraveling. "Launch all fighters," he roared. "Engage the humans. Do something." The pirate fleet scrambled into action, but they were disorganized, panicked. They had spent so long in the shadows, preying on the weak, that they had never prepared for a full-scale military annihilation. Ghost Squadron cut through their ranks like reapers. A pirate destroyer attempted to maneuver for a counterattack, but before it could adjust its firing trajectory, 4 human fighters darted into position, launching precision torpedoes into its engines. The ship erupted in a fireball, sending debris spiraling into the burning nebula. On the Damascus, Commander Rodriguez watched with cold satisfaction. "This isn't a battle," she murmured to her officers. "This is pest control." Lisa's final move. In the depths of the base, Lisa and her team reached the security hub. It was heavily guarded. Armed pirates stood at every entrance, their weapons raised, their posture alert. They knew something was wrong. But Lisa wasn't playing fair. She pressed a button on her stolen comm device. A second later, every light in the base went dark. Every door slammed shut. The security systems collapsed. Across the Black Maw, pirate defenses failed one by one as human hacking algorithms overtook their systems. The pirates weren't just losing control of their ship. They were losing control of their entire existence. Lisa smiled grimly. Checkmate. The killing blow. On the bridge of the Damascus, Rodriguez saw the security failures pop up on her tactical display. "Perfect," she murmured. Then she turned to her weapons officer. "Fire the main cannon." A single lance of white-hot plasma erupted from the Damascus, piercing through the chaos of the burning nebula and spearing straight through the pirate flagship's shields. It didn't explode instantly. Instead, fire blossomed within the ship's structure, spreading like an infection, consuming it from the inside out. The pirate crew screamed as fire and vacuum tore through the corridors. Captain Drexar, barely alive, staggered to his feet as his ship died around him. He coughed, his mandibles twitching. This isn't possible. But it was, because they had made a fatal mistake. They had stolen human children. And there were no second chances for that. The final moments. Lisa and her team reached the extraction point just as the human Marines breached the base. Her father, David Rennick, was the first to step through the blast doors. The moment he saw her, his battle-hardened expression broke for just a second. "Lisa! Dad!" She ran into his arms, but only for a moment, because the fight wasn't over yet. She turned to the Marines, her eyes blazing with purpose. "The pirate leaders are trying to escape through the auxiliary hangars," she said. "We can still stop them." David Rennick looked down at his daughter, the daughter he had trained for this very moment. Then he smiled. "Lead the way. No mercy, no escape." The Black Maw was dying. Flames consumed its corridors, licking hungrily at metal walls as bulkheads groaned under the pressure of structural collapse. The Seventh Fleet's relentless assault had turned the once feared pirate stronghold into a floating coffin, a tomb drifting in the heart of the burning Maw Nebula. But some of its inhabitants weren't dead yet. Captain Drexar stumbled through the smoke-filled halls, his mind racing. His once pristine command jacket was charred. His mandibles twitched in ragged spasms, and his third eye darted wildly in search of an escape route. His empire, built on the suffering of the weak, was gone. Yet he still had one chance. The auxiliary hangar. If he could reach it, he could escape. He could disappear. The galaxy was vast. Somewhere, anywhere, he could rebuild. But first, he had to get out of here alive. And that wasn't going to be easy. Because the humans were coming. The hunters close, and Lisa Rennick crouched at the edge of a ventilation shaft, her sharp eyes scanning the darkened corridor ahead. The pirate defenses had crumbled, their once confident guards reduced to scattered fugitives, running blindly for any available exit. But they weren't going to get one. Not if she had anything to say about it. She pressed a finger to her earpiece. "Jamie, do we have visual on the auxiliary hangar?" A second of static, then Jamie Lou's voice crackled back, breathless but steady. "Yeah, they're all heading there. But it's a mess. Some of them are fighting over ships. Looks like Drexar's trying to shove his way onto a corvette." Lisa smirked. Not for long. She turned to her team. The 20-odd children who had survived the nightmare of captivity. Some were bruised, others were battered, but none were broken. They had already won the mental battle. Now they just needed to finish the job. She raised a stolen plasma pistol and looked her people in the eyes. "This is our chance," she said. "We're going to make sure none of them ever take another child again. No mercy." There were no objections, no hesitation. They moved. Desperation in the hangar. The auxiliary hangar was in complete chaos. Pirates shoved past each other, pushing, shouting, scrambling toward the last remaining ships. Smoke filled the air, sparks rained from the ceiling, and the floor was slick with coolant leaking from ruptured fuel lines. Lieutenant Korek, Drexar's panicked second-in-command, was already strapped into the cockpit of a shuttle, bypassing security locks with desperate speed. Drexar slammed a clawed hand onto the hull, his rage boiling over. "You're not leaving without me," he roared. Korek didn't even look up. "I am if you don't get inside now." Drexar bared his fangs and started to climb aboard. A single plasma shot rang out. The console in front of Korek exploded in a shower of sparks. He screamed, recoiling, as smoke curled from the ruined system. The shot had come from a hangar entrance, from a 12-year-old girl holding a plasma pistol with absolute precision. Lisa Rennick stepped forward, her boots crunching against the metal floor, her face cold and unreadable. "You're not going anywhere," she said. Drexar turned toward her, hatred and fear twisting in his expression. "You little—" Before he could move, the other children stepped into view. One by one, emerging from the shadows, their stolen weapons gleaming under the flickering emergency lights. 20 children, all armed, all trained, and all of them out for blood. Drexar Vol, feared pirate lord, butcher of colonies, scourge of the Andromeda arm, realized that he was not a hunter anymore. He was prey. The execution. For a moment, the hangar was silent. Then Drexar roared. He lunged for Lisa, his massive frame a blur of muscle and fury. She didn't flinch. She didn't have to. Because every single child fired at the same time. Plasma bolts tore into Drexar's body from every direction. He staggered, his eyes wide in shock, as energy rounds punched through his armor, ripping into flesh and kitten. He gasped, bloodied claws clutching at the smoking holes in his chest. He fell to his knees. Lisa took a step forward, standing over him, her pistol aimed between his eyes. "You should have done your research," she said softly. "Humans don't break." And then she pulled the trigger. Drexar Vol, the infamous pirate captain, was dead before he hit the ground. The final sweep. The rest of the fight was over in minutes. Some pirates surrendered immediately, dropping their weapons and throwing themselves to the ground, begging for mercy. Others tried to run, and were cut down without hesitation. By the time the 7th Fleet's Marines stormed the hangar, weapons drawn, they found nothing left to fight. Only a group of children standing amidst the wreckage, their faces grim, their weapons still warm from the battle. Commander Maya Rodriguez arrived moments later, stepping through the smoke-filled room, surveying the scene with calculating eyes. Lisa turned to face her, expression blank. "Base secured," Lisa said. "No survivors." Rodriguez raised an eyebrow, impressed. "Good," she said simply. She looked around at the young warriors standing before her and nodded once. "You did well." Lisa exhaled, letting the last of the adrenaline drain from her system. Then, for the first time since the nightmare began, she let herself breathe. Aftermath. The warning. Hours later, the surviving pirates were rounded up and brought aboard EDF warships. The 7th Fleet scoured what remained of the Maw Nebula, ensuring that nothing, and no one, was left behind. But one last message needed to be sent. Lisa stood on the bridge of the Damascus, watching as the long-range quantum broadcast was prepared. Commander Rodriguez stepped beside her, arms crossed. "You ready for this?" Lisa's jaw clenched. She nodded. The transmission went live, broadcasting across every pirate stronghold, every black market hub, every slaver outpost in the known galaxy. Lisa's face appeared on thousands of screens. Her voice was calm, cold, final. "This is a message to every pirate, every slaver, every raider in the galaxy. If you take human children, you are not kidnapping hostages. You are signing your own death warrant." The screen cut to black. And across the galaxy, a single phrase burned itself into legend. "Never take human children."